And this is Brent Allen Winters coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up the racket all night long. We're going to talk about both of them, Lord willing, today. We're going to start with question 279 of a slice of the unwritten word, a catechism on the Constitution of the United States. Our Constitution is in writing, obviously, but understand it's what people have observed of the way things are, and they aren't going to change the way God has made it. What works, not what's logical necessary, maybe, may not be logical, but what we have over the thousands of years come to understand works as a matter of government. And by the way, really what does work, and you can prove it over a few thousand years, as our common law has done. Oh yeah, a few thousand years. I don't listen to this baloney about, well, our common law began with Magna Carta. It did. Our common law is from the same source as the Bible. It's eternal. It's always been among men, always been among men. Never was time it wasn't. The presence of God brings our common law. He rates with God. It is his mind, wherever he is, and he is everywhere, and always has been in his creation. All of him is everywhere at every point. Of course, the person of God inhabits the physical body of his people. A presence is different. But as far as his law, his mind being everywhere, it is. That's our common law tradition, and our Constitution of the United States are the conclusions of one group of men and what has been learned through the centuries that has been unwritten, but has just been learned because it's the way things are. And we're going to look at that. Laws of nature. And then, Lord willing, the book of Exodus, chapter 22, verse 19. I believe, yeah. We'll do that after this. Let's do this for question 279 of the Catechism on the Constitution of the United States, Arthur J. Stansbury, published 18 and 28. Listen to the question. Catechism is a way of learning questions and answers. Question 279 out of 333 says, if a person charged with a crime in one state shall flee from justice into the bounds of another state, is he safe from pursuit and trial? Let me repeat that. If a person charged with a crime in one state of the United States shall flee from justice, flee from justice. What is justice? What does that word mean in common law? It means due process. The normal courses. What is our common law? Due process. And that's the way the word justice is used here. A justice, due process, occurs in the judicial branch, the co-equal judicial branch of government, co-equal with the other two branches, not above them, not below them, co-equal with them. Not commandeering the other two branches, but co-equal with them. Neither one of the other two branches have authority to commandeer our courts. That's common law government. Three separate and co-equal branches. No, the Supreme Court of the United States is not final for anything but the courts of the United States. Repeat that. The Supreme Court of the United States is not the final word for anything but the judicial branch, but it is the final word in the judicial branch by stare decisis precedent. That's an unwritten rule, by the way. You won't find that in the rules of civil procedure. That's our common law tradition. That's the way it's always been, and that sets us apart from all the rest of the world, except a handful of other common law countries. And the common law countries, by the way, are England, Britain, I could say Britain, and all her colonies and former colonies. Now, let's stop a minute. All Britain's colonies and former colonies, I say Britain, the United Kingdom, Scotland, England, Wales, Cornwall, Ireland, all of her colonies and former colonies. How many former colonies does the United Kingdom, Britain, really have? How many? Really, de facto, only one. We, the United States, are a former colony. We are not a colony. Remember our Declaration of 76? We have undone the political bands that connect us. And we're the only common law country in the world that is a common law country as a result of war. We said we want our common law back, and we're willing if you attack us. And we did. All the rest of the colonies of England, from India to Bermuda to British Honduras, to the Cook Islands, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and a whole lot of others I haven't mentioned. All of those are really still colonies. I was talking to a former citizen of Britain yesterday. I said, and his father it was. And I said, well, if you're a citizen of England, or a citizen of Canada, or a citizen of New Zealand, or Australia, or Tasmania, or the Cook Islands, my understanding from what I read is you can travel to all those without a passport. But it's all one big happy family, a commonwealth. He said, I don't know that that's true. I said, well, that's what I read. You go look it up. I believe it is true, by the way. In other words, de facto, they're still part of the British Empire. And the Queen, still a king now, still has a response. The crown is in a position where all the people in those countries have responsibilities to be loyal to the crown. Except one. That's the United States. But we're all of us are common law countries to varying degrees. And the United States is the most common law country in the world. What I mean to say is, as comparative lawyers have said for quite a while now, that the Americans are more English than the English. Much more English. Say, well, we got all these Mexicans and all these Africans and all these South Americans and all these Arabs and all. How can you say we're more English? Well, because your culture is founded upon your fundamental notions of law. Right and wrong. Law dictates culture. Law dictates law. Whatever lawgiver you accept, the lawgiver, the God you accept, will dictate all of your culture, as Van Til says, and rightly says. Culture in any country is its religion. Is religion externalized? Our country has a Christian culture. The useful idiots of the evil empire are doing all they can to overcome it with illegal immigration. You're against immigrants? No, I'm not against immigrants. Obviously, my people are immigrants. They came here, well, not all of them. Like over 80% of Americans that have been here since before 1850, you're going to end up at some point having red man tribal blood in your veins to some degree. But I had ancestors that came from other places. But then I had ancestors, as they used to say, that met the boat when they got here. I had both. Met the boat when they got here. Us Americans are a mixed up bunch. But it is our culture that dictates who we are more than our blood. More than our blood. Oh, yeah. You have family things that come to you, but that's culture. Christianity came to me through my family. Thank God. Thank God. It's my duty to propagate it and keep it in my culture, in my country, because if I don't, we lose our land. Because Christianity is all about the entrusted land and the trust settlement of God into a common law trust for his people. That's what it's all about. That's the bottom line. The trust settlement, everything comes back to that. Everything. Not something. All things. Christianity, your relationship to your God, if you profess to be a Christian, whether you understand it or not, it's better if you do understand it, is governed by your understanding of God's trust settlement with you and where you fit into it as a beneficiary and under trustee. Both. Both. Well, talking about whether or not a person charged with a crime in one state can flee from justice into the bounds of another. Is he safe? Will they come get him? Answer yes. If the governor of the state where the crime was said to be committed applies to the governor of the state where he has taken refuge, the governor of the state where he has taken refuge will deliver him up, be taken back to the other state. But that doesn't answer all the questions. He'll only do it. The governor of the state where the man fled to will only do it after the courts of his state prove to the governor that he's going to get a fair shake. He's going to get due process. That means he's going to get common law in the state that wants him. We live in separate sovereign jurisdictions called states, like sovereign countries. And under our United States Constitution, those sovereign countries called states have given up some things, some of their powers of sovereignty to a national government. Not many, but some. Bankruptcy, admiralty law, admiralty jurisdiction, bankruptcy. No state court has jurisdiction over bankruptcy, impairing of contracts, or admiralty, but the courts of the United States do. They've given those up. Our Constitution of the United States says that. And there's good reason for it, so that we'll have free commerce between the states. For example, one fellow in one state, if we have bankruptcy courts in our states, he could apply in the state of Nebraska and go bankrupt against a man in Ohio for $10 million. There's nothing they could do about it in Ohio. That's why we say, no, to keep commerce flowing freely and fairly between and among the states of the United States. Bankruptcy can't go into a state court. That wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be a level playing field. You go into federal court. Same way with admiralty. Just a couple of examples. But other than that, of course, the states are sovereign. And if one state doesn't believe that a man wanted who has fled to their state is going to get a fair trial in the other state, or due process has already been violated, the courts will look into that, hear evidence. That's what's called an extradition, or an extradition hearing. Extradition means, well, yeah, we'll give him, we'll send him to another state. I remember reading not long ago about a pervert. He was a Jewish immigrant to the United States from Europe, who made an absolute fortune in the movie industry as a director. I think his name was Polanski. I think he's the one that directed the horrid, perverted film called Rosemary's Baby. I think, but it wasn't that one, it was another, or many others. Well, he got to fiddling around like people do. He got a couple of 13, 14-year-old girls in his house, in his big mansion in Beverly Hills, and slipped them a Mickey, as we used to say, slipped them a Mickey, gave them a drug that made them docile, and he did what he wanted with them, had his way with them. Well, California, that was in California, They found out about it later, and he fled, I believe, to France. Or no, Europe. But then he's stupid enough to come to a film festival in France. This was years later. And California was waiting on him when he got there. I only know what I read. That's what I read. That's the way it happened. I'm probably sitting in jail now. I don't know. Could be. Well, that extradition, see, from a foreign country is like extradition from a foreign state. As a matter of fact, in the United States, the courts refer to each state as sister states, but also as foreign states in cases of extradition or corporate law. When they start talking about jurisdiction, what state court has jurisdiction, one state is viewed as foreign to another. Yeah, sovereignty is still alive in America, state sovereignty. The state flag of some states say that. I know the state flag of Illinois says, on the flag it says state sovereignty, national union. State sovereignty, national union. Well, that's true of every state. They decided it was important enough to put upon their sovereign state flag. By the way, just one more point to drop a footnote. There's two kinds of grand treason in our country called the United States. If you go to other countries, they'll have one kind of other common law countries like England, they'll have one kind of grand treason. That's treason against the crown of England, period. That's it. In America, we have two kinds of grand treason. We have grand treason against your state. You can commit treason against. Why? Because treason is only committable against the sovereign. The sovereign. You can commit treason against the United States. That's a sovereign government. Sovereignty answers to nobody down here on earth. Answers to nobody. Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, and any other state, east or west, are also sovereign. Therefore, they have crime in each of the states called treason. And it's usually a capital crime. John Brown, we used to say, remember that song? John Brown, body lies a moldering in the grave. See if I remember it. John Brown, body lies a moldering in the grave. Oh, that's the famous song that the Northern troops sang. His truth is marching on. Yeah, that was one of the verses. John Brown was hung for treason. Why? Because he was some insurrectionist. He was nutty for fruitcake, by the way. He wanted to start an insurrection of slaves, and so a bunch of the abolitionists got together and took over the engine house, the federal engine house at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Now, Harper's Ferry is in West Virginia now, because there was no West Virginia when he took it over. Armed insurrection. They got inside. In the U.S., it was an engine house there on the river, a ferry engine house. Because it was interstate commerce, the feds took over. Of course, that's admiralty jurisdiction. You're talking about navigatable waters. And they needed an officer close by. That was out in the wilderness then, the mountains. They needed an officer that would go there with troops and storm the engine house and stop the insurrectionists. The closest one at that time that the feds felt they could trust was a fellow now well known. His name is Robert E. Lee. He was a Union Army general, graduate at West Point, veteran of the Mexican War. They didn't have any U.S. Army soldiers around there. But they did have some small contingency of U.S. Marines, so they put him in charge of the U.S. Marines to charge the engine house, and they did. I mean, they just charged it, bullets flying everywhere. Some of the boys got hurt pretty bad, but those inside the engine house got hurt too, and one of them, John Brown, he got shot. Eventually, he was tried for what? Treason. Oh, now, who tried him? There's the other question. Two possibilities. The state of Virginia or the federal government, the United States government. The United States government said, well, we want to try him for treason, but first we're going to let Virginia have a crack at him. And they did. The state of Virginia tried John Brown for treason and sentenced him to hang. And he did. They hung him. That wasn't against the United States, friends. It was against the state of Virginia. Sovereign state, see. Well, we recognize that. And then when Virginia decided, voted, state legislature voted to leave the Union, what did Robert E. Lee say? He said, I'm loyal to my country, but I'm bound to follow my native state with my sword. And he did. Responsible for killing a lot of people, thousands, and getting a lot of Southerners killed. To what purpose? To what purpose did he do that? Smart as he was, I have always maintained, and now I maintain more openly, a lot of stupidity on both sides, but the South did a very stupid thing. Knowing they could not win that war, they antagonized it quite a bit, fired the first shots, invaded the North, and then after that, it was total invasion of the South and total destruction of those states. Sam Houston, senator from Texas, fought the idea of the South all the way, became governor, fought it there, tried to stop Texas from leaving the Union. He knew they'd be destroyed. Senator Thomas Hart Benton did the same thing in Missouri, Southerners. And thousands of other Southerners did all they could to try to stop it. It was a minority, friends, of the South that pushed that war, prosecuted it, all to their own destruction. Well, the North was wrong about a lot of that. Well, maybe they were, yeah. But our law, the hand of our common law, is strong enough to handle those kind of differences. And it should have been resorted to, and it wasn't. It was not. The processes, our common law is due process, and the processes of our common law will enable peaceful resolution. Peaceful resolution. Are there rare instances where that won't occur? Yes, it happened between us and England. England was burning our town, had plans to infect our whole population with smallpox and kill us all. Bound to be protective of the colonies, England turned on the colonies in America, but total destruction. Incited the Indian tribes to slaughter men, women, and children in New England and in the South, in Georgia. We knew we had to do something. We didn't attack them, but they came and attacked us. Well, we'll talk more about that. And we want you to go to commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, and join our upcoming class at Winter's End. Clause by clause and blow by blow, our Declaration of 76. That one document. That's one of the 4 documents that the Congress of the United States has recognized as fundamental to our American understanding of reality. There is, of course, in America, our documents, Articles of Confederation, Constitution of the United States, a Declaration of 76, of course, and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 for the governance of the territories north and west of the Ohio River. Those are the 4 documents, 4 American documents. And not to minimize at all Magna Carta, called the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 and our Constitution of the United States, quote, lift phrases from Magna Carta. Magna Carta is not the beginning of our common law, not at all. It's just another solid, a record of a solid stepping stone in the history of our common law, as is our Declaration of 76, Articles of Confederation, Constitution of the United States and Northwest Ordinance of 17 and 87. We're going to talk about the Declaration of 76. It's what breathes life into otherwise dispirited and dry bones called the Constitution of the United States. The dispirited and dry bones of our Constitution of the United States are properly organized, but they're dispirited. And our Declaration of 76, the language of it, the words, the phrases, are impelling because the spirit behind those words breathes the breath of life into our Constitution of the United States and causes it walk on all fours, become applicable, because our common law doesn't take notice of hypotheticals unless it's a real case in controversy. And our Declaration of 76 dovetails with our Constitution as separate points, showing that what we're doing is we're complaining because the old country was trying to push the law of the city on it to supplant the law of the land, our common law. Go to commonlawyer.com, sign up for that course. In doing so, you'll support what we do here.